Alright, so my current event is about Conor McGregor and his equity stake battle with the UFC following his fight at the UFC 205. A little introduction: the UFC, or Ultimate Fighting Championship, was founded in 1993 as a professional mixed martial arts organization, MMA for short. And as of July 2016, it was actually purchased by a huge Hollywood agency called WME IMG for $4.2 billion, which was a major shock in the fighting MMA world that would be purchased for that much. So now talking about UFC 205, it was held at Madison Square Garden, which is pretty unique because New York actually uplifted a ban on unsolicited MMA fights in April, so UFC wanted to get a fight at the Madison Square Garden. So that happened this last Saturday at UFC 205, with the main event being Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez. Conor McGregor won, and now he has two title belts to his name at the same time, which is pretty unheard of in UFC. Um, on the financials for UFC 205, it generated around $17.7 million just in ticket gate revenue. That doesn't include pay per view. But for pay per view, there's probably around more than 1.65 million purchases, which is pretty unique as well. So the article I summarized kind of talks about Conor McGregor's rise from poverty from Ireland, and now he's a huge major star in the UFC. It also talks about his battle in UFC 205, and talks about what is he going to do next. Is he going to have a rematch with Nate Diaz for round 3 of their event? Is he going to take some time off because he said he was going to have a kid? What would he do next? But the main thing that they talk about is the equity stake battle. So a little background on that. After his match at his press conference, Conor stated, actually demanded that he receive an equity stake in the UFC, or he will hold out for matches until that happens. It's kind of unique that he would think to do that, but there's many different opinions on it. Obviously, Conor wants it because he thinks he deserves it. He thinks he builds the sport. He generates revenue. He markets himself, and obviously the financials back him up. You can look at UFC 205. You can look at the past matches he's been in. They've generated around the same amount of money. So you can see why he wants a little bit more, and he wants to actually become a part of the organization. However, there's other people such as Max Kellerman, who's co-host of ESPN's First Take and also is an MMA columnist for ESPN. And he says that Conor deserves everything he has, but he credits the success of UFC to Dana White, the president of UFC, for marketing all these athletes and really growing the sport and the brand of UFC in general. And he says the UFC is just like other major sports leagues, that there will be a new Conor McGregor, younger athletes ready to take the throne. So he believes that Conor's equity stake battle is a little far fetched, and he shouldn't be trying to get that. What's kind of unique is the UFC has remained silent. None of the staff or spokespeople have talked about it really, which means they could be weighing the options, but most likely they're just ignoring it. Conor's pulled stunts like this before, and they've reprimanded him for it. So I think they're just going to ignore it and try to move on and hope for the best. The implications, if he does hold out, it could cause a reduction in revenue and viewership for the UFC because he's a big name star, and you can see with his past events that he has generated a lot of money for the UFC. But if he does hold out, it would put a spotlight on new fighters. There'd probably be more even matches, so that could be one positive. If he does get the equity stake, it could be seen as unfair to other fighters. They would want the same thing. They don't think that just one fighter should be able to have a claim to ownership in the UFC. It could be a trend-setting move from the UFC, trying to promote their athletes and say, hey, we're going to give back to our athletes in this way, and it'll kind of motivate them to even win more, because if they generate more money for the UFC, that means they generate more money for themselves. And so that's pretty much kind of my whole paper and what I really got out of it. So I'll be posting the discussion questions soon. So thank you.